let's talk about Call of Cthulhu. If you have even a passing familiarity with the tabletop role-playing hobby, you're probably well aware of this game's existence already. Originally penned by Sandy Peterson and published by Chaosium in 1981, Call of Cthulhu has maintained a steady presence in the space ever since, with the current 7th edition, in particular, released in 2016. There's no shortage of published material, both official and fan-made, adventures and supplements alike, to drag your friends through a game of reality-twisting nightmares. Countless incomprehensible terrors from beyond the outer dark to inflict upon your investigators, plucky detectives seeking answers for that which was perhaps best left alone. However, I'm not here to talk about that sphere of the game. I want to talk about these bad boys. What was arguably a slim, sleek duology of a couple early entries 40 years ago has had a bit of resurgence from Chaosium. The Alone Against series, which as of this writing has a grand total of 5 official releases from the publisher, is a collection of solo adventures where you and possibly a few unfortunate NPCs find themselves ensnared in these dark corners of the earth. From the cozy haunts of familiar New England to forgotten depths on the other side of the globe, there is a solid variety of adventure to be had here, all of it terrifying in its own ways. Imagine essentially choose your own adventures where sometimes you get devoured by ghouls at tourist attractions in the dead of night. The best part is you don't need to pick up any of the rule books or even the excellent starter set, which I don't have here because I don't own a physical copy. You don't have to buy any of these exquisite, dread-filled tomes either. Everything you need to get started with the Alone Against series is available for free online. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Chaosium have gone ahead and made everything you'll need for playing Alone Against the Flames, an introductory adventure for the Alone Against series, as well as the Call of Cthulhu game itself. Easy to find, download, and play. This handy itch.io page for the solo adventure has the downloads readily available for the adventure, a character sheet to track stats for your budding investigator, and even the quick start rules, a slimmed down version of the full thing that has all the info you'll need to get started. You can also make a game on Roll20, not sponsored, but the PDF itself lets you navigate quickly between the prompts these books are structured around, so the latter would be my recommendation. So moving on, let's dive into the adventures themselves and talk about what sets them apart from one another and why I think they're worth your time, even if the idea of solo RPGs doesn't seem that appealing. Beginning where you probably should as well, Alone Against the Flames, written by Gavin Inglis, is exactly what it needs to be. It's short, playable in about an hour and change, works as an accessible tutorial for new players, and hits all the thematic high points that you're looking for when it comes to cosmic terror. I'm not going to spoil too much here, or with any of the other books for that matter, but everything within will give you an idea if the rest of the series is worth checking out, or the game system itself, looking at it from a broader perspective. Coincidentally, a physical copy is included in the aforementioned starter set, so if you're keen already to get up in on this tentacle nightmare nonsense, you can run yourself through that book first, and then you're prepared to subject your loved ones to the other adventures in that box. Going back to talking about Flames itself, when I said this works as a tutorial, I mean that in a very literal sense. You don't have to read the rules, you don't have to build a character, just print out a sheet for tracking stats. As you play along, start reading from prompt 1. Whoever your investigator turns out to be, like so many before, they have their sights set on going to Arkham. And as you go through these prompts, you'll create them from a curated list of professions. Set their stats, set their skills, and you're all set for bad times in central New Hampshire, just as the locals are putting together their yearly festival. I mean, look at this guy. This shit's on fire. He's running away from it. How could this be anything but a terrible mistake? If you've never played Call of Cthulhu before, or the basic role-playing system for that matter, here's how it works. You take percentile dice, aka 2d10s or a d100. You try to roll equal to or under the specific characteristic or skill that you're trying to roll. For example, I rolled a 4, a whopping 4. So if I was trying to do, say, what are we good here? Photography. I did some excellent photographying of central New Hampshire. Trying to avoid getting shot. Dodge roll, so you don't end up with a piece of lead in your gut. Psychology roll to figure out if the standoffish librarian is trying to hide something from you. And then maybe a spot hidden roll to discover their closet full of cursed paraphernalia, which you definitely were better off not knowing existed in the first place. All of this and more awaits you in Alone Against the Flames. And for the incredible price of free, I heartily recommend it as your first stop on this train ride of terror. It gives you a foundational understanding for both the rules and structure of the Alone Against books, and frankly, it won't take up too much of your dwindling precious time. But is there anything to not like about it? To be fair, I don't think so. Sure, there are some things to be said about having a more open-ended approach, allowing you to build your character from scratch, and that kind of resulting in playthroughs going kind of similarly. I played it 3 times, twice initially and then once more for this video essay thing, and each time they all felt kind of samey leading up to the grand finale. And sure, the character build and decision points led to different outcomes, which gave me further insight to the adventure itself, but by the end of the last playthrough, I was definitely feeling like, yes, this was a great time. I don't think I need to play it again. But as I said earlier, it hits those highs I'm looking for in a spooky story. And at the end of the day, maybe that's enough. Let's turn the clock back, way back to the incredible year of 1985. What happened then? I don't really know. I'm a jaded millennial, but I do know that it was the original publishing year of Alone Against the Dark. The revised edition was released in 2017, is by both original author Matthew Costello as well as Mike Mason. And it's, I think, about as far as you can go from the style and structure of Flames. They both look the same. They both got pages and numbers and sections that you keep flipping through. But if Flames is like the initial assignments you get when starting a college course, then Dark feels like the final project where sometimes you aren't really sure what is actually important to nail a passing grade. And then sometimes you follow a strange man into a house and narrowly avoid being murdered. Real example, by the way. There are tons of instances where the lethality is cranked way up. But fear not, for rather than creating one investigator to trudge through the mire, Dark comes with 4 narratively linked nerds, so that if one should fall at the hands of cruel fate, there will be another to stumble into the picture and take their place. Alright, I'm going to dial it back a bit because I don't want to come out of the gate seeming like I didn't enjoy my time with Alone Against the Dark. I did. I absolutely did. And of the whole series, it is by far the most interesting of the bunch. It has you doing meticulous timekeeping, see this calendar, as you progress from day to day, month to month, to track down whatever mysterious cult schemes in the background to bring about the end of the world. It has you chasing rumors across the globe, and at the same time jotting dozens of notes along the way. And I'm nothing if not a sucker for minutia and paperwork amidst catastrophic circumstances. Here, I'll just show you what I'm talking about. We start this adventure with our boy, Professor Louis Grunwald, in his home residence of Arkham on September 1st, 1931. This is his starting date, and each of these other investigators continues down the timeline as you may subsequently need to play each one. In the Getting Started section at the front of the book, you get 5 pages discussing the necessity of all of this time management stuff. It covers some of the usual topics, including sanity, combat, and luck, but curiously also things like food and sleep and using the telephone so you don't take a cab to the university to ask them why Professor What's-His-Name isn't in today even though you need information from him, or calling the newspaper to ask about news from Athens. Trust me, in the moment, when you're making these little marks on the calendar to track the hours and jotting down all your notes from visiting the local diner, it's much more enjoyable and immersive than it appears on first read. Throughout Alone Against the Dark, you're still going to be doing a lot of the same thing. just in a more sandbox fashion. Rather than following a series of mostly straightforward prompts, you have a table for navigating what are effectively contained environments for a number of different locales you'll stop in throughout the adventure. You'll start in Arkham, make your way down to New York City, catch a ship to cross the Atlantic, and, if you're lucky, you might even survive that trip and stop the world-ending crisis that I mentioned earlier. Here's the thing, though, about how my first playthrough turned out. Where'd he go? Old Lewis here, luckiest to ever come out of Massachusetts. Seriously, every terrible decision I made that should have ended with Professor Grunwald being eviscerated immediately, he simply bumbled his way out of. I can think of 3 distinct moments where I began to reach for the next character sheet out of the bunch, only for him to survive and by the end of it, save the world. And I didn't even get to do the part that uses... Where'd I go? Where did it go? And I didn't even get to do the part that uses this little pyramid that you have to cut out. Anticlimactic, definitely. And so for the sake of the video and my own curiosity, rather than start a whole new playthrough, I simply rolled the clock back and thought, what if Grunwald didn't avoid getting shot at half a dozen times? What then? Suffice to say, it gets pretty good. I won't show you the pyramid. I won't tell you where the adventure took the professor's buddy, the industrialist Ernest Holt. By the time you get this deep in, just through playing Alone Against the Dark, you'll have your own expectations on where it's headed, so I don't want to say anything else that would take away from the experience. It is above all compelling, achieving a novelty that its peers don't quite share between one another. Moving on then, from the sunny coasts of the Mediterranean, we head to the bitter cold of Canada's Northwest Territories. Alone Against the Frost, solitaire adventure in Canada's wilds, originally by Glenn Rahman, was likewise published in 1985 as the first of these solo adventures, with a revised edition published in 2019, written additionally by Gavin Inglis, and includes a few tweaks. There is a marked difference between these two 80s scenarios, and it can feel like whiplash playing them one after another. But given the chance to go back and see these adventures brought back to life with a 7th edition makeover, it's wild that within such a short span, they provided these contrasting experiences. In this one, you play as Dr. L.C. Nadelman, a Miskatonic academic obsessed with early North American prehistory. And now that you finally got funding approved for a summer trip up to the Great White North, decide to take along 3 of your most promising graduate students and local wilderness guide in a misguided attempt to make new, bold discoveries, only to discover that that was an awful decision and you were probably much better off staying at home in the city. Of these companions that you can... Hang on, let me find the sheets of them. Yeah, there we go. That's the stuff. That's the ticket. Of these companions you can take along, each of them has their own distinct vibe, but the lattermost gets full points for being the only one sensible enough to react to any signs of outright alien presence by immediately leaving. I cannot stress how much I love the fact that the native guide, Charlie Foxtail, will see some weird shit happen and say, "No thank you, I will be leaving. Good luck, don't ever talk to me again." Seriously, it's one of the first things that can happen in the prompts. And it's this interplay between your side characters that makes Alone Against the Frost probably my favorite. Like all the other books in this series, there's ample opportunity for these characters to perish in less than desirable ways. And now that you've got yourself and 4 others to babysit and hope that something doesn't just happen to them in the middle of the night. Yet bringing your impressionable grad students comes with an advantage. While you can still assign points for Dr. Nadelman, you can perform roles using the other characters in your party, assuming they're still around for this camping trip of not gonna make it out alive. For example, to go back to Sweet Baby Charlie, she has great scores in track and survival and the like, probably important for roughing it in the great outdoors. Sorry, Bernard, I'm sure your fiance back in the city would be impressed by your climb score if you had literally anything else that would be useful. And no, navigation does not count. That's what I'm here for, because I'm the main character and I'm not getting lost in the wilderness after you trip on a log or something and die. There are, of course, contingencies in place if someone you end up needing does perish. Specifically, you keep track of keywords at certain points during the adventures, often when a character can no longer participate for whatever reason, and a later prompt may instruct you to proceed differently if you have that keyword. The adventure does get more difficult, however, as the Spectre of Tragedy follows your party around. You came looking for creepy old stuff and just didn't expect any of it to still be alive. Boy, that sure would have been nice. Frost lies quite closely to Flames in terms of overall gameplay, but with a punchiness that I appreciate, especially on repeat playthroughs. You'll go through the initial stages of the adventure quickly and with branching paths more or less immediately following your arrival. And I think that's what makes this one the standout for me. I likewise played this one thrice and each time had what felt like a wildly different experience. I'm certain with that a couple more runs I will have gotten through the gamut of the thing, but looking back, it's the one I'm most excited to take off the shelf again and have another go at. We return to what could be considered the modern entries in the series. Alone Against the Tides, written by Nicholas Johnson and Co., is actually the second entry I played after Flames, and I picked it for the simple reason that, from reading online, it seemed to be the closest to that introductory adventure, and damn if that isn't the long and short of it. Now that's not a bad thing by any means. I think the fact that Chaosium's first entry, published in 2020, is closer in intent and gameplay makes it the next logical step to try, especially for players new to the hobby or Call of Cthulhu as a whole. It does mean that we end up hitting a few similar beats. Isolated town, shifty locals, bad vibes, you get the idea. That's not to say it doesn't provide anything new or interesting compared to its peers. For starters, should the character you played in Alone Against the Flames survive, you can easily bring them over for another romp through some other coastal New England hellhole. The threat is also more direct, so whereas on repeat playthroughs with Flames, the retread of prompts felt tiresome, here it's like going back to a beloved film knowing the juicy bits are right around the bend. So whether you're bringing a fresh face around or the adventure's own pre-generated archaeologist Dr. E. Woods, your journey to the fishy town of Esperay has enough of a different tone and pace to make it stand out all on its own. Given that it is on the shorter side of things, I won't go into too much detail, but you'll find yourself in the thick of the action quickly enough after the establishing details. But I do have one major grievance to bring up here, in spite of how well I think the setup for Tides is done, and that is how it handles failing forward. I'll explain what I mean without giving too much away. We're on the fourth entry of these books. And if we take a look at the previous three, there is something they all have in common separate from Tides. Flames, Dark, and Frost all offer different ways to handle misfortune happening to the player character. Whether that's speeding up the narrative, giving you another investigator to run in their place, or inflicting the damage wholesale onto a secondary character. Whereas in Tides, there are tons of fail states centered around combat scenarios where if you aren't built for it or just roll poorly, the game ends. No follow-up, no second chances. Your trip to Esperia is over. Better luck next time. Which is a shame because I think the NPCs and plot threads in Alone Against the Tides have a better way of sticking with you once you flip to that final game-ending prompt. It's just so frustrating trying to get to that point. In the other adventures, you feel like you're caught in this web of interconnecting points, but here sometimes you just bang your head onto the wall at a dead end and you just go back to the start of the maze. This one is still solid overall, but if Frost is the one I'm antsy to crack back open, Tides will likely stay on the shelf for a while. I didn't actually have anything prepared for what I was going to say at this part. Hi, it's Sunny from the future, which when this video comes out is still technically going to be the past. As you can probably guess from the footage, I had intended for it to come out a lot sooner than it actually is. But, you know, sometimes life gets in the way of things. Anyway, after I had actually finished recording this footage, Chaosium announced that they were going to release a version of Alone Against the Tide that includes a audio narration for it, available to play on your phone with apps and things. Future technology. How is it? I don't know. I haven't made the time to actually try it out. But if you out there have actually done so, let me know what you thought of it. That'd be really cool to round out this whole experience of something I've spent way too much time working on. And you could leave a comment or something, and that'd be cool. So thank you. Now we're in for a treat. We've come to the final entry and the one I saved for last myself. Alone Against the Static by B.W. Holland feels almost like an indulgence for anyone who is a fan of found footage horror. Everything within feels true to its inspiration while evoking its own genuine, lonely uneasiness. There's a foreword where Holland talks about the experiences of growing up so far out in the woods that you can only imagine what goes bump in the dark. And I think Static lives up to that idea in spades. Where to start? First off, this is the only one that takes place in the modern era, specifically an isolated cabin in North Dakota, miles away from any semblance of civilization. There's a kind of subgroup preference for Call of Cthulhu that steps away from the default the 1920s jazz era, which I myself have never really cared for. So it's cool to see something closer to a time period I find much more interesting. To be fair, that could be the jaded millennial talking. Static makes the most of the time period to show how, even with modern advancement, this is only another avenue for the same cosmic horror to manifest. Secondly, the two characters included in Static, Alex and Charlie, provide a taut, emotional layer to the narrative cake as you play from one side of this crumbling relationship, unlike anything from the rest of the series. They've come to this wilderness cabin in hopes of fixing what they have, unaware of the dangers they'll find themselves trapped in. And third, what elements that are here reminiscent of earlier entries feels refined. We get a printable log sheet to help keep track of story decisions, a narrative with more tightly focused branching paths, and a sharp undercurrent of dread from start to finish. You can feel the polish while playing through, like all the rough spots from earlier entries are taken care of to provide what has the look and feel of a stellar experience. It's a shame then to say that despite the higher production value, the gorgeous artwork, the sharper focus, the hardcore cover printing itself, I mean, look at this thing. It's beautiful. All of this, I don't think it's as worth your time as, say, Alone Against the Frost. And that largely revolves around replay values. While the first part of Static gives you slightly different perspectives for whichever doomed lover you pick, these don't feel like enough of a variety expanding past that initial choice. The decisions you make are largely the same, the outcomes changing more so from the difference of the numbers on Alex and Charlie's character sheets. It just feels odd that all the effort gone into presenting them as distinct playthroughs in the early game, that impression fizzles out shortly after. There's this creeping thought I keep having that this could have been improved by only having one playable character with some customization, leaving the other to stay purely as a NPC. I love this one. I really do. It pushes all my buttons when it comes to the genre. Unsettling body horror, emotional trauma, foreboding seclusion. If I had to pick one purely on aesthetics alone, it would be Static. Hands down, every day till Sunday. It's just that after two playthroughs, one as each side of the unhappy couple, I can't shake the feeling that I've seen most of what the book has to show me. I will say this though. Unlike some of the other entries of Alone Against, where I felt I've had my fill and was ready to move on from them, I can see myself settling in for another cozy play of familiar terror in the Midwestern woodlands somewhere down the road. So I have a bit of a confession to make. I've never been the biggest fan of Call of Cthulhu. I adore cosmic horror, that feeling of being consumed by sinking loneliness, brought on by the realization of our insignificance. but I've always enjoyed other interpretations or adaptations of it. For example, like Delta Green, a sort of cousin to COC with a modern era conspiracy theme, but ultimately the same mechanics. Now, you can go here. So I hope when I say that playing through these books has given me greater appreciation for the game, that it's gotten me looking forward to the next time I play Call of Cthulhu proper, regardless of it being a solo excursion or playing with friends. It shows just how great these things can be. So if you're going to play one and only one, that's an easy recommendation to make. Just play Flames. You can get it for free. It'll teach you how Call of Cthulhu and the basic role-playing system works, and by the end, you'll know if you're keen to keep going with it. And if you are, I suggest following up with Frost. There's more to track of, sure, but in terms of presenting that cosmic terror expected here, I think it does the best job with enough to keep you coming back for another round. From there, it really just depends on what you as an individual prefer. If you want something more interesting, more novel, full stop, then go with Dark. While it may feel tedious at times, that's absolutely part of the charm, and it has layers that'll keep you busy peeling for a while longer. For a narrative focus, gotta be Static. I think looking at this cover, you'll know if it's the kind of thing you'd be into, and if you don't mind a bit more linearity, you're going to have a pleasant time with it. And if you do want something that provides just a modified experience to what Flames had to offer, for all of its shortcomings, Tides does get the job done. That's it then. 5 flavors of terror to choose from until you've had your fill. But where does that leave us then as players interested in this kind of content? 5 is not especially a big number, and Chaosium only seems content to release one of these every few years. Now there are fan releases as well that I haven't covered here, such as the well-received Alone Against Nyarlathotep, available on DriveThruRPG, that I haven't covered largely due to time. But clearly there's an audience for this stuff, especially when we get into the broader perspective of solo RPGs growing in popularity. It's just a matter of how long we have to wait. All that said, there's a lot to love here. Each of these books has brought me hours of enjoyment, memorable in their own ways, and I hope that if anything, I've gotten your interest piqued to what's on offer. And if you find yourself as fascinated with these adventures as I have, with a bit of luck, we may not have to wait much longer. The last entry came out back in 2023, and I hope that whatever Chaosium has planned next waits around the corner, biting in darkness.